Hunter Johnson and Emily Allant were two of the first people to arrive at the King Road house that November morning. These are the friends who prompted the 911 call. Their actions described by other families as heroic. But for them, it was a morning that changed everything.
According to ABC, on November 13, 2022, University of Idaho student Emily Allant and her boyfriend Hunter Johnson answered a phone call from a worried friend asking them to come over. There's no indication of the time of that phone call, but the couple and another friend walked down the street to the now infamous 1122 King Road. So there were three of them walking down a walk, they told ABC News, that would change their lives.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. So this is brand new information from faces we've not seen before, names we've not heard before. And these youngsters are speaking out for the first time.
They're speaking out for the first time about what they want people to remember about their friends. It's not just about how they died, but about how they lived.
But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button. Bear in mind, I have actually traveled to Moscow. I did walk around that area, also went to the area where Brian Koberger lived, also the Mad Greek restaurant in Moscow where Maddie Mogan worked. The trial is also scheduled to start, I think, in the third week of August. It's been delayed slightly. Anyway, let's get started with today's analysis. According to People, at 3 a.m. on Sunday, November 13, 2022, University of Idaho student Hunter Johnson got up and uncharacteristically locked the door to his girlfriend's off-campus apartment in Moscow. That's something I've never done in my life there, Johnson, 24, told People. He said, there was no noise. I don't know why, but something in my soul told me that I should go lock my door. As Johnson secured the door, his girlfriend Emily Allant, her roommate Josie Lauterin, and her boyfriend at the time all woke up. We hung out in the living room for about 30 minutes before we all went back to bed. That's what Allant, 23, told People. But just down the road, four other students, not just students, but close friends of theirs, didn't lock their doors and didn't sleep peacefully.
You know, you see the world in pure innocence, and that all gets ripped away from you in one phone call. That's just the day that changed it all.
This morning, for the first time, the best friends of Ethan Chapin and Xana Kernodle speaking out about that November day when they discovered Ethan, Xana, Kaylee Gonzalez, and Madison Mogan brutally murdered in an off-campus home.
According to ABC, Johnson was the first to go inside, and realizing what happened, he rushed the girls trailing him out of the home and told them to call 911. So he quickly realized what was going on. It does seem as if the first person to discover a crime had been committed was Hunter Johnson. Back to the article. Several girls frantically spoke to the dispatchers saying, she's passed out and she's not waking up. You then hear Johnson on the call using all of his strength to remain calm, telling the dispatcher that Kernodle, his friend, wasn't breathing. It's actually incredible that some misunderstood the severity of what they were seeing once on the scene, but perhaps the mind cannot fathom a scene when it's this unfathomable. And then they actually talk about this to ABC News. He says, I think most of the girls at that point were very irrational, which is a very probably normal thing to be feeling at that time. I think another thing that's going on is some of these kids have got or hungover, and they sort of haven't slept very much. And so they're not really at their brightest. They're not at their most alert. They're not sort of reading the room, I guess, in a way that they could otherwise. And so he says, you don't expect anything so terribly scary like that to ever happen in your own house. And then he goes into this area. He says, your brain doesn't allow you to believe things that are terrible when you've never had anything terrible before that, Allant added. And I've certainly been in a situation like that where something traumatic happened to me, and you can't really, it won't register. It's like there's a processing problem. Anyway, Johnson didn't tell ABC News what he saw inside the house, citing the upcoming trial. So obviously just what they're allowed to talk about is going there and just what that was like and the night before.
I don't think anyone expects anything like that ever in their life to happen.
Hunter Johnson and his girlfriend Emily Allant now telling their story in a new Prime Video docuseries, One Night in Idaho, The College Murders.
Now, I'm not sure if it was the habit of the residents of the funhouse to lock their doors. It probably wasn't. But even if it was, that DoorDash delivery meant if someone wanted to slip in that night of all nights, and someone did, well, they would get the opportunity. But now we're learning more about the events as they transpired that morning. According to ABC, once police arrived, Alan said, "We were just placed, on the street to sit down and wait." That must have been pretty awful. We were all cold, we were all scared, and we were there for a long time. And I think our brains just started to continue to spiral. Now, this is kind of an analogy to Amanda Knox outside of the villa, same kind of situation. Do you think those students were flirting with one another or making jokes? Or do you think there was this very complete, shocked to the core silence? Do you think any of them said something to someone else like, of course they suffered, they fucking bled to death, which is what apparently was said in the murder of Meredith Kircher in the halls of the police station? Can you see how just totally inappropriate it would be? And so there they sat, these students, and they say, we watched the ambulance come and we watched them immediately leave. I'm not sure if the ambulance arrived and immediately left. I would imagine that the crime scene techs would have needed a long time to process the scene. Anyway, according to People, asked the next morning by Dylan Mortensen, who also lived at the house, to come check out the house because of strange goings on the night before, Johnson went over first, followed by Alan. Now, you get the feeling that Dylan didn't want to go out her own room. She stayed there and she was too scared to go outside. To his horror, Johnson came upon the slain bodies of Kernodle and Chapin in her second-floor bedroom. I was like, what is going on? Is this real? Then you realize the gravity of what you just walked into. At that moment, you don't realize what you walked into until you really look at it and process it.
Emily says she and Xana were inseparable.
We were attached at the hip probably the first day that we met. Yeah, we just clicked immediately. We were same personalities, I feel like.
The article in People, as well as the promo on GMA and in ABC, it appears to be promotion for the documentary coming out on July 11th, and also PR for a book, The IDAHO4, An American Tragedy by James Patterson. Pretty slick, but it is kind of gruesome how facts and evidence simply become part of a campaign, slick public relations to sell, rather than what this really is, a real human life tragedy. To actually sew up the stories of these students, I think, sets a precedent for turning reality into a kind of monetized reality TV, and doing this with such young people, teaching them to be, in my opinion, mercenaries in terms of their fellow man. I find it kind of quite deplorable. I think it's one thing for true crime to cover this case. I think it's another to not salivate so much in terms of this case, in terms of its shock value. Anyway, that is just my thoughts. What do you guys think? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.